Lots of Pesaching the past few weeks, and so now we have this time now in between Pesach and Shavuot, and we're counting the days and counting the moments of our lives. So what I wanted to do today, I'm just going to manage the, 1 second. Okay. What I wanted to do today is to share another psalm, actually, and to have us think about the meaning of the psalm and what it represents as an incredible thing for our practice. You know, one of the things I love doing is showing how the Psalms are an incredible spiritual tool that most of us don't really know how to enter into, simply because we're so overeducated and we are so conditioned by our culture. We read it as very interesting ancient poetry, but we don't necessarily see it as a vehicle for our spiritual practice. So I often like to teach Psalms as a part of these instructions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hopefully share my screen. I want to teach some of the 139th Psalm today to get us going. Let me see if this works. Wrong one. 1 second. Give me one more second. Gotta love modern technology. Here we go. Okay, now I go back here, and now I share screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see now my screen, and I am, what we're looking at is the Hebrew and the English for the 139th Psalm. So I'm just going to start to read some of the Hebrew and the English, and we'll just sort of see if we can see it on the pshat level, on the simple level of what the text says, and then we're going to go into how we can actually sit with it as an instruction. So L'natzech LeDavid Mizmor Adonai Chakartani Vateda. For the leader, a Psalm of David, O Lord, you have examined me and know me. Ata Yadati Shivti V'kumi Banta L'rei Merachok. When I sit down or stand up, you know it. You discern my thoughts from afar. Orchi v'riv'i zeirita v'chod rachai hiskanta. You observe my walking and reclining and are familiar with all of my ways. Ki ein mila bilshoni hein Adonai yadata chula. There is not a word on my tongue, but that you, O Lord, know it well. Achor v'kedem tzartani v'teshet alai kapecha. You hedge me before and behind. You lay your hand upon me. Pli'ah da'at mimeni v'niskaba lo uchala. It is beyond my knowledge. It is a mystery. I cannot fathom it. Ana elech me'ravcha va'ana mipanecha evrach. Where can I escape from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Im esek shamayim shamata va'atzia sha'ul hinecha. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I descend to Sheol, you are there too. Esa kanfei shachar va'ashkena ba'acharit yam. If I take wing with the dawn to come to rest on the western horizon, gam shayadcha tancheni v'tochezeni yaminecha. Even there your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. Okay, so those are the lines I wanted us to look at this morning. So on the surface, we're reading this it's beautiful poetry. It's about the omnipresence of God, right? It's about this beautiful expression of awe and wonder and love, that somehow God is present with us in absolutely every moment, in every place we can imagine, in every breath we take, the presence of God is with us. And, so much about how we have received, or that we continue to receive, these teachings is through a very Western and very Christian, because we're living in a Christian society, way of reading these things, where God is the big boy in the sky, and he's like the king, and he's usually a he, and we are the little ones below, who are the recipients of God's beneficence. That certainly is the typology that we see here in the Psalms and in these biblical texts. But I want us to see if we can now take a moment and look again at these texts. Look again at these texts from the perspective of what we know from our practice, from what we know from meditation. And we begin to see something beautiful and something very powerful and true that is not such a simplistic God concept. It's actually a very sophisticated God concept. I want to direct our attention to what we're doing when we're sitting and meditating, right? When we sit in meditation, we're simply following the breath. And as thoughts and feelings and states of being arise and fall, we notice them, but then we come back to the breath. And that's the core of any meditation practice. But what are we actually cultivating when we do that? We're actually cultivating, for lack of, there's no good words for this in English. We're cultivating awareness or consciousness. We're cultivating this sense of of this awareness within which everything arises and falls, and which is a very powerful, that has incredible implications. Because, if you are the observer of all of your thoughts and all of your feelings, and you are the observer of all of the stories of your life that are coming and going through your mind at all moments, well, then you are not your thoughts. You are not your passing feelings and emotional states. You are something more than that. You are the aware, it's much, what we eventually cultivate over time is the sense that what we are is something infinitely more than simply the small I, or the ego, right? The ego that we normally identify as. We're cultivating a much deeper and broader sense of what our identity really is. And that identity is this profoundly loving, profoundly peaceful awareness that is not shaken by the difficulties of life. We're cultivating this peaceful awareness that is simply always there and always loving of whatever it is that's arising moment to moment. So in a sense, and this is where it gets kind of esoteric, but bear with me, the truest sense of self that we're coming into, this sense of I am, is really the divine. It's really actually God. That's really what I think our Psalms and our prayers are all pointing to. That the awareness that we're working with when we sit in meditation, that we become connected to, it feels like our deepest, truest sense of being alive, but it's actually God. In other words, the thing that I thought was me, that's just stuff that comes and goes. It's just thoughts. The thing that really is me was God all along. That's kind of a radical thing to say, isn't it? God forbid, I'm not saying I'm God or you're God or any of us are the same thing as God. But this is again, it's esoteric. The actual deepest sense of your aliveness, of your consciousness, of your awareness is actually what we're referring to in Judaism as God. But here's the trick though. We don't call that deepest sense of I am me in Judaism. We call that deepest sense of awareness you, capital Y, you, or thou. We call it Atah. We say Baruch Atah Adonai, right? Blessed are you, O God, right? That even though what we're actually pointing to is not simply out there, but also at our deepest, truest self, at that awareness. I know that this is really, unfortunately, it's hard to teach meditation in a Jewish context without getting highfalutin, and I apologize about how esoteric it all gets. Feel free to ask a question if you need to while I'm teaching these things, if I'm not being clear. But if we look at the Psalm now through that perspective, we can see it differently. If you understand the God being referred to as the you, as the implied you, as the awareness that we're cultivating in meditation practice, right? So, O Lord, you have examined me and know me. Okay, that's the first line. So that sounds a lot like meditation right there, right? As we follow the breath, we are cultivating the awareness that is simply paying attention, that is examining me and knowing me as this thought comes and goes, as this sensation comes and goes, right? But the brilliance of Judaism is we named that you. Atah yadati, you, when I sit down or stand up, you know it. Well, we are engaged now in sitting, right? So this is a sitting practice. And when we sit in meditation, you, meaning awareness, know it. And the same thing ought to apply when we get up from our meditation chair or cushion or whatever it is we're meditating from. And when we start to walk into the world, that awareness knows it. You, the awareness, discern my thoughts from afar. Right? The awareness is not your thoughts. The awareness is simply present for your thoughts. If I'm not being clear, folks, please don't be afraid to say, I don't understand what you're saying. Okay, I just want to say that. I want to make it this a safe space for people to ask what I'm trying to talk about here, because sometimes it's hard to assimilate it all. But the you here is the very awareness that we cultivate in meditation. You observe my walking and reclining and are familiar with all my ways. You see how it all starts to fall into place if you understand this as the insight of meditation itself. There is not a word on my tongue, but that you, O Lord, know it well. So, this is beautiful in the sense that I often try to teach that what we're doing when we meditate is not simply, the point of meditation is not just meditation. We're training our whole being to bring the insight of mindfulness into everything that we do. Because mindfulness is actually the awareness that you, meaning capital Y, thou, God, are here with me as I do this action. I'm experiencing it as my own awareness, but it's actually God. You hedge me before and behind, you lay your hand upon me. Again, that's kind of like the idea of fashioning and creating from front and back and all that God, like we are like a vessel being shaped by the divine. I love this line. It's in the Hebrew. The Hebrew is a little difficult, but it's beautiful. Pli'ah da'at mimeni. So it's kind of like the wonder, the knowledge of this wonder is beyond me. Niskava, the sublime of this. Lo uchala. I can't even grasp this, how sublime this is. I love that, right? That this awareness that we're actually cultivating is so profound, and it so transcends the little I that I thought I was. It's mind-blowing. I think that line is trying to say this is mind-blowing. It's trippy. And then these beautiful lines here. Where can I escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I ascend to Sheol means the underworld, the world of the dead. If I descend to Sheol, you are there too. Awareness is not something that you just can get a sense of when you're meditating. It's actually always there, even when we're not conscious of it, even when we're only caught up in our daily mishigas. The awareness is actually always there. That's what's giving us the ability to think and to comprehend. And according to Judaism, that's God. That's what we mean by God, right? If I take wing to the dawn to come to rest on the western horizon, even there, your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. It's beautiful. And I think this is such an important psalm to teach because this is the nexus between the kind of very Buddhist-like insights that we get from meditation and the very Jewish wisdom that comes from things like Psalms and from Tefillah. And this is where, you know, it's true, when you get to a certain level, the world religions all start to look a lot alike. And that's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. You know, when the Buddhists come to these insights, they don't necessarily define this as God. They just defined it as the miraculous wonder of the unfolding moment to moment. And that's beautiful. And we take the extra step of identifying that with divinity. You know, we actually recognize that awareness, what we focus on, well, I should say, you know, we're not focusing on different things here, but we have different areas of concentration. Where in Judaism, we're focusing on how that awareness is profoundly and eternally loving. Right? That's what love is. Right? Love is this, you know, you hold the beloved in your heart always. You hold the beloved, that you are with the one you love, whether it be your spouse, your partner, your child, your parent, whoever it is. They're in your awareness all the time on some level. And God is that on steroids, right? So that awareness is pure love. And that awareness is constantly supporting you and bringing you to this moment and supporting you and yearning for you to do what is good and what is right and what is just. That's the Jewish thing we do with these very mystical and often very Buddhist-like insights. Any questions? I'm gonna stop sharing the screen now. Any questions on that teaching so far? Okay, I hope the silence is that you kind of follow me and not absolute and utter perplexity. So I'm going to ask us now to take a couple of minutes to sit. Assume the meditation position that works best for you, which means on your tush bones, and feeling balanced. Keep your back straight but not tense. And you want to just round your shoulders maybe a little bit and just try to relax the tensions. Take a nice deep breath and release. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If not, that's okay too. And I'm going to ask you to settle into the chair that you're seated in right now. Just settle into it. Feel the weight of your body comfortably seated, God willingly comfortably seated. And if it's not comfortably seated, that's okay too. Just feel your physical, material presence in this chair, in this world. Feel the muscles of your body. Feel the breath. You can feel maybe your heart beating. Feel the aliveness of the life energy and all the subtle ways that energy is coursing through your body in this moment. And when it feels right, just see if you can allow your awareness to settle peacefully on the breath. The breath coming in to a fullness in your body, and then the breath releasing to a peaceful place of emptiness, which then renews to a place of the in-breath, to the fullness, and so on. This cycle of life happening with each breath. The miracle of that cycle of life, that cycle of being. And as you're noticing your breath, notice the noticing. Notice that this miracle is unfolding within the awareness of the breath. It's an incredible miracle, this cycle of life that's happening inside your body. And as miraculous as it is, there's an even greater miraculousness, which is the awareness of that miracle. And if that's too trippy an idea, don't worry about it. Just pay attention to this breath, this in-breath, this out-breath. And as we follow the breath, we might notice sensations in the body. And then we come back to the breath. There might be a voice narrating your experience right along with my narrating voice, reacting to my voice or reacting to your thoughts. That's okay. Just notice it. Return to the breath. The more we sit, the more we might notice thoughts, images, feelings, emotions. We might have whole movies playing in our head. And so for this sit, I want us to work with those quote unquote distractions from the breath. They're not distractions. This is all the way it's supposed to be. And so that's why I want us to work with them. If there's a thought, whatever it is that occurs to you, bring your full 360-degree awareness from the breath to the thought or the feeling or whatever it is that is distracting you from the breath, with no judgment, with no frustration, with no resistance. And allow the fullness of that awareness to embrace what's arising. And you might notice something extraordinary when you do this practice, because when we embrace the thought fully with that awareness, we notice suddenly, unlike under normal consciousness, we're not identified as that thought. There's a spaciousness around the thought. There's air to breathe between the thought and you. And the thought has the fullness of its life and its passing, completely in the embrace of the awareness that is you. And that's a blessing, that awareness. That's why we say Baruch Atah Adonai. Blessed is that awareness of Adonai, of what is. You know, if it works for you, you can even bless it as a thought or a distraction or a sensation comes. And that awareness allows you to see it for what it is, which is not you. Baruch Atah Adonai. We call it Atah, thou, but it is really the truest and deepest sense of who you are. The Sufi poet called it the breath within the breath. So that's our practice for the next couple of minutes. To be settled on the breath, to feel the peace of being breathed. And then as thoughts or feelings arise, notice the embrace of awareness for the fullness of that thought, holding the awareness there with that thought or that feeling. And then as that feeling passes, the awareness comes back to the breath. Baruch Atah. Blessed is that awareness. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la. I la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. I la 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 I la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Okay. So in the last couple of minutes, I wanted to invite you to share any reflections on that sit or on the teaching. Also, any questions that you have. I want to remind us all that you know, we give each other permission to not to not know or to not understand something when we ask a question. So, if you have a question or a reflection on anything that has happened, this is the time to either raise your hand or just let me know. Yeah, Joel.
Yeah. So the way I relate to this in Psalm 139 is to think of God as to borrow a phrase from a Christian philosopher saying that God is the ground and source of our being.
Mm-hmm.
And if God is that, he is the ultimate parent figure. And in that relationship, one wants to usually emulate the parent figure. And going from that premise to what to Leslie and me is like the most important expression in Torah is that I am holy, therefore you shall be holy. And the value of the meditation in that context, where God surrounds us as part of us, is really this relational saying, how can I be holy like you are holy? And that enables me to relate to that in the way I think you would want me to.
Thank you. Yasher Koach, Joel. That is beautiful. That is a really important reflection. I think one of the things that is so powerful about typologies of God in our prayers and our psalms and throughout our tradition is that while ultimately, if you get into the highest level of what we call the sod, or the secret esoteric Kabbalistic understandings, everything is one. That doesn't mean that we don't live in relationship to another, right? That even though that awareness, that deepest sense of I am is actually God, that it's also that I amness is so immense, so incomprehensible, that it is absolutely not incorrect at all to call that you, to relate to that, even though that is our deepest sense of our own selfhood, to see it as in manifesting all over us in the world through our relationships as parents, as children, as spouses and loved ones, and to see the divine emerging through those relationships and through those typologies. That's exactly why the world is, as we understand it, created in the way that it is. So in the one hand, that it's the beauty of this and the power of this and the mystery of this is that even though the separation between you and me is actually only an illusion, ultimately, it's a beautiful blessing that we are given this opportunity to be these individuals in the world, making our way and learning how to emulate the ways of God, as you say, Joel, through our relationships and and our choices. Okay, Sharon, did you want to say something?
Well, first of all, I'm very aware of how much harder it is to say something with a whole group of faces staring at me than I would feel perfectly comfortable in a room to say it. But while I think it's a beautiful way to understand a psalm, honestly, the notion of God as awareness of self separate from self, I'm like, huh? It just isn't computing to me.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure you're not alone. I'm sure you're not alone. It's really deeply esoteric. And so that's why my suggestion is, is to look again at that psalm and simply, for the purposes of what we're doing now, is replace the God with awareness. Okay, and then suddenly it becomes a beautiful instruction for meditation.
Right. I was totally cool with that. But when I started thinking like, well, just let me think about everything else I think about God, and it just didn't go there.
So don't force that. Don't force that. If it doesn't go there, then it's not supposed to go there. Right? This is more cultivating that sensibility through practice. Right? That through practice, we cultivate the sense of this awareness as this holiness, this divinity that infuses us and that transcends us. And, maybe for you and for others of us, we're never going to connect that with the God concept that we inherited from, our lives and from synagogue or through Hebrew school or whatever it is. And that's fine. There's no requirement that you have to put these things together. But I do encourage us all to look to the Psalms and to our prayers in light of these teachings, in the sense that they really do open up the teachings. If you just want to define them as awareness or just consciousness or just meditation, that's fine too. For some of us though, to understand that that's what we mean by Yud He Vav He, by divinity, by the divine, that's actually a very powerful way to really get into the heart of what the prayers are actually are teaching us. So thank you for that. Okay, Roy, I see your hand.
So to begin, my thanks for sharing the psalm. It's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
The first thought that came into my head in listening to your talk about the song was something. It's an old Hasidic story about a Rebbe called the Kotzker. And if I remember it correctly, he was a young boy and he was asked, "Where is God?" And as a young boy, he said, "Wherever we let him in."
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the Kotzker Rebbe.
Yeah. And I was like, I thought a lot about that. I was like, whoa, that's interesting. So yeah, there's an interesting dialectic between the great self as God and the egoic self in relationship with that great self, all simultaneously.
Right.
And it is a mystery,
mm-hmm.
undoubtedly. It's not something to be understood with the mind, as far as I can tell, though that just may be a consequence of the mind I have. The other thing that I noticed while sitting was, oh, right, Shema Yisrael. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a listening that takes place, and that's, at least for me, that's how I let God in.
That's beautiful, and that's true. And that's true. I think give yourself a break if this whole connecting this esoteric stuff isn't is difficult. I mean, I'm speaking to everybody, because it's not the nature of our minds are designed to chop things up into pieces and to see things in broken up ways. It doesn't often intellectually compute. The idea that there is a great self and there's a small self, or a mochin, the gadlut and katnut, as we could say it in Kabbalah, the big mind and the small mind, and how they're all ultimately aspects of the same thing. Those are insights that we get, that we intuit, but that we can't necessarily put our minds around intellectually. God, for most of us, is an intellectual concept. And so, now I'm pointing to a mystical awareness that is the divine, which is a very different framing than we're normally used to thinking about God. But I think it's actually really important to point out that there's a nexus between what we're doing in meditation and what we mean by God in Judaism ultimately. And so again, it's something to just work with. If God for you is a very intellectual notion, then don't push it. And you're right, God is where we let God in. And that's literally what the practice is. We're letting God in. Other questions? George?
Yeah, this is the first time in any of these meditations, what you said sent me off in a completely different direction.
Uh-huh.
Thinking about thoughts, meta thoughts.
Uh-huh.
and kind of got lost, as if we're in a valley and hearing the echoes coming back and over on top of itself, like, you know, feedback. So I think I need to go further with it, but I just want to let you know that's where you led me today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You know, remember, feeling lost in something doesn't mean you're not meditating, right? It just means that that's where the awareness, that's the form that awareness took for you in that sit. Okay. And now, you know, and now we notice that and we work with that. You know, sometimes we absolutely just fall asleep. We literally fall asleep sometimes in meditation. And that's a legitimate meditation, right? It's all legitimate. And again, it's all about the practice. And I mean by coming back to it, just like we come back to the breath, right? And yeah, we can get lost in meta thinking, and that's why it's trippy. And that's why we have to have an anchor for our meditation, which is the breath. Right? All the great traditions anchor it in something, either the breath. Some traditions have mantra meditations. You know, some of them are more embodied in other aspects of our physical being. Whatever it is, sometimes it's a candle, right? Although I think that's not very good for your eyes. You have to anchor yourself in something so that if you feel like you've gotten lost or gone down a rabbit hole, you have something to go back to, right? So as much as this stuff can get very trippy, it's always very grounded in the physical, in the body. In fact, that was the you know, we're out of time really, but there was another aspect of this teaching that I wanted to get to, which is the teaching Chorva Kedem Tzartani, that front and back you have shaped me. And the Sfat Emet teaches, that's a line from the Psalm. The Sfat Emet comments on it and says, you know, the part of us that is the front, that is shaped by God, that is our spiritual side. And the part of us that is the back is what he calls the animal side, the material side. And he talks about how human beings, if you look at the story of creation, were created at the very end of the creation, right at the end of Friday, right before Shabbos, on the sixth day of creation, human beings were created at the end of all the other animals. And then it's Shabbat, which is all about spirit. So we are the nexus of the body and the spirit, right? And so when we're sitting in meditation, we really become aware of how as beings, we are on that nexus. We can be in the world of thought and spirituality and esoteric, but we are also bodies. We are also physical entities, and that is equal to all of the spiritual stuff that we're practicing in meditation. And so the implication of that is that it is legitimate and right to ground ourselves in our bodies and in our breath, to come into the awareness of your physical body, that is as spiritual a thing to do as understanding that all is one, right? That the most spiritual thing you can do equal to that is simply to be with this breath, to be with your body as it is right now. They're not separate. They're equally sublime. Any other questions or comments or reflections? Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much for joining together today. It was wonderful to meditate with you. I will see you same time, same station next Friday. And Shabbat Shalom. And most of you, hopefully, I will see 6:30. Sally and I will be leading Kabbalat Shabbat this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.